Replacing Ultra hardware. In most cases, active store hardware should not be replaced before Panasas Technical Support is issued an RMA for the part. We'll talk about RMAs in our last topic for the training. There's usually no opportunity to troubleshoot an issue once a part has been replaced. The issue may be caused by a software issue or by a different part. We will see later that there are many different things that you can replace, say, in an ASU 100 node. Even if it is clear which part needs to be replaced, it's usually easier to find the part serial number while the part is still installed in the realm. We do need the serial number to be able to replace something. If an experienced customer, and I can't really think of a case of this with Ultra nodes. On the Alpha, maybe so, but if an experienced customer needs to replace a part to make the realm accessible and we are not immediately available, go ahead and replace the part. Experienced meaning that you know the consequences of replacing whatever it is that you've decided to replace. Please keep the part that was placed on hand so the part can be described to Panasas Technical Support later. All right, replacing a storage node or any part of it. Again, we're going to go over some of the other things, and this is very important, so I'm going to repeat it every chance I get. An OSD that is a member of a blade set should not be replaced. Replacing a node can either mean replacing the node chassis or replacing one of the external drives. The realm is either currently using the data stored on the OSD or may potentially use that data later if we decided to revive the OSD and bring it back out of reconstruction. No critical part of an OSD, such as a drive, should be replaced if the node is a member of the blade set. An OSD must be removed from the blade set by a completed drain or reconstruction before being removed. An OSD in one of the following states is not a member of the blade set and may be replaced. Failed, drained, not activated. Not activated means it never was a member of the blade set. If the GUI shows an OSD offline, it may still be a member of the blade set. We've got to check the node state on its detail pages. From here on out, we've been talking generally and talking about, well, on this node, but in this section, we're going to talk exclusively about the ASU 100 storage nodes, but the same concepts apply to the ASU XL, the all-flash, and the ASU 100E. There's just a little bit of difference in the execution of the actual swapping. I'm going to check the node state in the node's detail page. This one is failed, so it is safe to replace the node or one of its drives. The object storage section is not even there in its detailed area, so it is not a member of the blade set. Here we are. This node is drained, so it is also safe to replace this node or one of its drives. There is no object storage section in the detail section, so it is not a member of the blade set. External drives, if we need to replace one of those. The external drives in a Charlie storage node may be individually replaced. Actually, all the Ultra storage nodes, the external drives may be individually replaced. The Charlie ASU 100 node has 6 external hard drives accessible in the front and 1 external SSD accessible from the back. The internal M2 NVMe drive may not be replaced by the customer. There might be some kind of emergency where we agree to do that, but in general, we don't do that. A Charlie external drive should be replaced after consulting with us if the drive has a solid red LED. The LED, again, is in the lower right corner of the drive carrier. I'll show that to you in a minute. The drive has a smart predicted failure. The node reports that the drive is missing. On reboot, the node still does not find the drive, or the logs indicate that the drive is malfunctioning in some other way, and that would usually mean that a technical support has looked at the logs and seen some kind of slowness. Log by ButterFS. Here we are, and this is an actual failure that I showed you some time ago, and my camera doesn't really pick this up. This is fire engine red there. So very, very obvious. Here are some smart predicted failure warnings. On ASU 1.2. And this is a drive missing warning from another node, and that background should be yellow. I actually caused this to print this error. By the way, in causing this to predict this, I wanted to see what happened if the drive disappeared while the node was online. I pulled it. I had to go into single user mode and run FISC on the root file system. It was so drastic. Don't pull a drive while the node is running. Okay, here we are, that same node, this one, on its detail page. Here's our drives listing, predicted failure. We saw this in the troubleshooting nodes page section. Okay, so Panasas Technical Support has RMA'd the hard drive. It has arrived. If you have a platinum support contract, then you have drives already on site where you can just replace it and go. First of all, we're going to verify that the OSDs and failed drain are not activated. State on the node details. If you think there's any question that you may not be able to find the node, on that same details page, blink the LEDs. If it's just one drive failure, this should work. If the node is in one of these conditions, this button will be present, clear record of the node. Don't do this. This just makes it, it's not catastrophic, but it just makes the replacement process more difficult. For an OSD that is in drain and failed, the realm will clear the record by itself. If there's a failed drive, the drive status LED will probably be solid red, and this command will not work because the drive is dead. However, if it's just predicted failure, and we're not sure what it is, that we do not have a way in the GUI to light these LEDs. That was considered, it was going to be more work than it was worth. This pancali command, syscontrol node, the node, drive, the number, LED locate. This sets the blue locate live to, no, it's blinking red with the following commands. Okay, so we're going to go to the drive. You do not have to power it off. I'm going to physically remove the drive. You can remove a drive if the node is not activated. Failed and drained are forms of not activated. I'm going to physically remove the drive. I'm going to push this maroon lever there that pops out this handle, and we're just going to pull the whole thing out. This is the replacement. You do not unscrew the drive from the tray. We're going to take out the whole tray. We're going to put in the whole new tray, and you're going to throw this, either throw this in the trash, throw it in your shredder, however you dispose of hard drives. We do not want it back. In the back, here's the external SATA SSD. Again, the lever, pull it out. Here's your replacement. You're going to put it right back in. Install the replacement drive. Don't remove the drive from the carrier. Going to insert the drive carrier assembly, close the carrier level until the latch button clicks into place. That means that the drive is fully seated. The drive status LED will be a red for about 5 seconds while it powers up. and then you want to verify that that status LED turns itself off. You won't see any I/O activity yet because the node is not a part of the blade cell. Right? Now we're going to go to the node details page, and we're going to see that we no longer see the drive warnings. The node will not have changed its state, but the drive should have changed its state. Okay. So we're going to look at the drive assets area that we saw above. Now it should be good. And if you flash the LEDs on the node, go ahead and stop them here. You've replaced the drive, but now the storage node has an inconsistent internal file system. Remember that the drive is part of an internal file system. If it's one of these hard drives, it's a RAID 0 array. If it's the SSD and back, it is still part of an overall file system. This is inconsistent, so we've got to make it consistent. The system will not allow the OSD to come online with it in this state. To correct both of these issues, we tell the node to make a new internal file system. We call this reinitializing the node. Can't do this from the GUI. That's because we, technical support, ask engineering to remove that button from the GUI because it was too tempting for people to reinitialize nodes that shouldn't be reinitialized yet. So syscontrol node, the name of the node, reinit. For example, syscontrol node, ASU 1-2.1, reinit. You could also use the IP address there. Okay, let's say this times out. The node is not accessible over the network. Sometimes having a bad drive actually impairs the connectivity for some reason that I don't fully understand. Going to SSH into the node with IPMI, the network, or the VGA console. You don't actually SSH into a node with IPMI. So you either SSH into the node or access the node with out-of-band IPMI or VGA console. We're going to get the node's hardware serial number. Your RMA information also has this, but we're just going to say get dev info, hardware serial number, and this is going to print. We're going to run syscontrol node reinit without any other arguments. That's going to reinitialize the local node. It's going to ask you for confirmation. I'm going to say, to verify that you're reinitializing the correct node, please enter the IP address, hardware serial, data center serial number. You can just copy and paste the output from that. And then it's going to summarize this data, what it is, so you can verify that you are on the right node. We have had people run a local reinit on the director before, and they are redundant, so we could get out of that, but nevertheless, it was kind of a pain. So if this is the node you intend to reinitialize, please type capital yes or any other key to cancel. But that way, if for some reason that fails, you can use this low-level command, exec timeout 0, pan unconfig -reboot. If the node is unconfigured, you need to put the full path there. The node has not rebooted within 10 minutes. Sometimes the reboot just doesn't execute. Just power cycle it with the front power button. It's plenty good. Once we've done that, the node being reinitialized unconfigures itself. It sets every local configuration to the factory default, creates a new internal file system, the very same file systems we talked about on Friday with the OSD v4. It increments its data serial number. So it has a different data serial number than it had before, and it reboots. The president removes the node's record from the Realm database, but not from the DHCP record, because DHCP is nice to nodes. It knows that they may be rejoining the realm so they can get the same IP address. Not particularly important for a storage node, but it's kind of nice. The node rejoins the realm as a new node and a known enclosure. It is a logically new node. President knows that nodes in the enclosure are to be added to blade set 1, so the node comes online if it is healthy. If the node was previously considered with an IPMI IP address, it retains that because reinitializing the node takes no action on the BMC chip. That's where the IPMI information is stored. Failed drive does not need to be returned to Panasys. You can dispose of it however you wish. Please fill out a certificate of destruction for the drive so we can get our money back from the vendor if the drive is still under warranty. All right, let's say it's not an external drive. If a Charlie ASU storage node has a hardware failure in any part other than an external drive or network cable, we replace the entire node chassis. NVDIMM fails, we replace the whole thing. NVMe fails, replace the whole thing. It's got a networking issue, we replace the whole thing. We do not support replacing any part inside the node chassis. We could consider an exception in an emergency where the blade set has volumes whose failures exceed redundancy, and replacing an internal storage node part may allow these volumes to be successfully reconstructed. We've done that for years. We'll call them Franken whatevers when we've got one failure in one thing, one failure in the other, and we can just put something together. Or perhaps we can get something replaced faster if there's an emergency. So we're going to replace the storage node chassis. If it is responsive, we're going to blink the LEDs like we showed before. There's a good chance it's not responsive, but maybe it is. If not, you can just do whatever you think is appropriate to figure out which node it is. You can flash other nodes in the enclosure. That can be a little bit tricky because people may think that it's the node to be replaced that's flashing, so just make sure you're communicating with the people who are actually in the server room. Pair the node. We're going to power. In this case, we do need to power it down. We're going to power down the node with the front power button. Remove each of the node's external drives. You could have halted the node if it was responsive from the GUI, but we're just kind of assuming that you're there. Might as well power it down with the button. Remove each of the external drives, put them in a safe place. Remove the network cables, label these so you can put them right back the way they were. Pull the node out of the enclosure from the front. So here is the release level. You're going to push this down and pull on it. And here's the floppy pull tab. We're going to pull this too. Now these drives are not going to be in there when you're pulling it out. This is a very tight fit in here. You may need to go around back and give the node a little push from the back as well. Install the replacement Charlie storage node chassis in the enclosure slot. You'll hear a click when the node is successfully seated in the slot. Install the external drives that you previously removed. They don't have to go in the same slot that they were before, but best practice is to do that. That just avoids any kind of confusion. The external SSD must go into the same slot that it was before. In the lower slot, if it's not in the lower slot, it will not be recognized. Connect the network cables. Make sure to connect them in the same interfaces they were connected to before. Confirm that the link lights show that each cable has connectivity. The network card has power even if the node has standby power. After you've done all this, power up the node with the front button, power button. And we're going to wait for the node to reboot. Still going to be in failed. Oh, this is in the wrong order. This is still a configured node. Oh no, it is unconfigured because the NVMe drive has all the node's identity and it says I'm a new node. The node's MAC address is different, so it will receive a different IP address than it had before because the DHCP records are keyed to MAC address. Nevertheless, the external hard drives that you just put back in them, it contains component data. The replacement node, it's inconsistent. It will put its internal file system state to plus failed, and the president, this node is going to join the realm into not responding, not activated state because it is in plus failed. Going to fix this by reinitializing the node, just like we did before with the drives. This lays down a new file system on top of these drives. It's now got a consistent file system. It should come online. However, if the PANFS version on the node's internal NVMe drive is not the same as the version on the realm, which it frequently isn't, the system's going to upgrade and downgrade the node. We talked about this before. This is the off version upgrade. After the reinitialization and any PANFS upgrade or off version upgrade or downgrade, the node should come online. In this case, we've got a new BMC chip. So if you want IPMI configured, you need to do it again. And here's our knowledge base article on how to configure that. Okay. If the system is not using the default LACP with a short timeout, you need to configure the node's networking, and we talked about that in the network connectivity topic. There's about a 99.9% chance that you are using LACP with a short timeout, so nothing is required there. If you have, we do not want the drives back, however, we do want a failed node back. If you have a secure drive support contract, most of you don't, but if you're military, defense contractor, or some enterprise systems that just don't want to give drives back, you're going to open up the node's chassis, you're going to remove and destroy the NVMe drive and the NVDIMM. These hold persistent data, and fill out a certificate of destruction for these two items. Then we're going to return the failed node chassis without all these things to Panasys. Put it in the box the replacement came in. The replacement includes the prepaid FedEx waybill. If you can't find it, we'll print you out another one. Contact FedEx to pick up the return. If you're in the European Union, and I don't believe anybody is here, they have a separate system. FedEx contacts you. And here are some relevant knowledge base articles. This Panasys OSD is general things like verifying that it's in the right state. Is how to replace the drive, how to replace the node chassis, and how to open up the node to destroy these two things if you have a secure drive support contract. Okay. Questions so far on replacing parts of storage nodes? Right. You remember? The system automatically removes a failed or drained OSD from the blade set because the system knows that we're not going to use this anymore. The system automatically removes the record of a failed or drained OSD when the OSD is replaced. In this case, we usually, since we're replacing parts, it would be when it's replaced or reinitialized. In contrast, the system does not remove a director node that is not responding. From the rep set or remove the primary volume service assignments. There are more factors to consider with this, So the storage administrator must decide when it is appropriate to take these actions. We talked about these and the relevant topics, but we're going to go over them again now. And then there's a knowledge base article that lists all these. So we're going to do these steps for all types of director nodes, ASDs, director blades, any kind of director. Okay. If it is a member of the rep set, we're going to remove it from the rep set. We're going to go to hardware, realm management, replication. And again, if the node is the realm president, this is going to cause an outage of about 30 seconds, assuming good networking. Otherwise, it should not cause an outage. If the director node will not be replaced for some time, and there is a healthy director in the realm that is not a member of the rep set, you can add it now. If you're going to install the replacement director node or the SSD shortly after this, you can wait until the replacement director comes online to add it to the rep set. The director node is the active or primary director for any volume services. We're going to move these direct services to another director. We did not do the lab for this. When we talked about volume services, we will do it today. We will move the service manually. We will in our lab move a backup service, but when you replace a director, sometimes moving the backup service just causes more complications than it's worth. If you move the primaries, then the volume service will not fail over, the volumes down for 90 seconds, etc. So when you move the volume services, the volumes go down for about 1 second. This should not be noticeable to even an interactive user. If you're using IP aliases for NFS access or legacy sys access, you want to disable the aliases. This causes the alias to fail over gracefully. We'll talk about that when we talk about NFS. Then we want to halt the node. If this fails, we can power down the node with the front power button. We talked about not powering down an ASD 100 with the front power button. However, we've already moved the volume services. So it doesn't matter whether the director saves anything in its NVDIMM. That's now irrelevant. So we can power down all kind of directors with the front power button in this circumstance. If it confuses you that I can power my ASD 100 in some circumstances and not in others, then you can just unseat it or do whatever it makes sense to you to be consistent. In this case, we do want to remove the node's record from the realm database because it's just simpler that way, especially if it's an ASD 200. But we'll just keep it simple, or a director blade, we'll just keep it simple and say, always clear the record. You want to clear the record, halt it before you clear the record. If you clear the record first, you cannot halt it because it's no longer in the realm. You can't halt it through the GUI. Okay. The node's detail page returns an error once the node's record has been removed. It just says this node doesn't exist. This is normal and expected. All right, so now we're going to talk about the particulars. We're going to talk about replacing a Delta ASD 200. These director nodes have one internal M2 NVMe SSD, so they are all one piece. There is no, let's replace the drive, let's replace the chassis. So if any part of the Delta director node fails, the entire node is replaced. We're going to run the preliminary steps. Remember the rep set with the primary volume services. We're going to remove all network cables from the back. We're going to unleash the latch lever. They are in the back. We're going to remove the node from the enclosure. We're going to replace the ASD node and hear the click. So here is our latch lever on the left side looking at the back of the ASD. And here's our pull tab. You can't push it from the front because the front is only those empty hard drives. But these are not as tight. You shouldn't have any trouble pulling this out. And put the new one in. Connect the network cables. Make sure they have link. Power on the node with the front power button. The node should boot. Obtain an IP address. Join the realm. Reinitializing the node is not necessary. Every bit of it has been replaced. There's no inconsistency. If the node is not the same PAN-OS OS version, it's going to upgrade or downgrade. The node should come online. Configure IPMI if you wish. New BMC chip, so it will be configured with factory default values. Here's the knowledge base article. And again, in the rare case that you're not using LACP with a short timeout, you're going to configure the node's networking. And we're going to run the steps later in the topic. Add the director to the rep set, if appropriate. Balance the volume services. Again, if you have a secure drive contact, support contract, you're going to open the failed node's chassis, you're going to destroy the M2 NVMe and the DM, return the failed director chassis to Panasys. We do want it back. Okay, Bravo, a little bit more complicated because it has two parts. The Delta ASD director nodes do not have an external drive, but this is replacing a Bravo SSD, so I think that's confusing. We're going to run the preliminary steps. Remember from the rep set with volume services. Power it down. We're going to take the front cover off of the faceplate off of our Bravo enclosure. Pull the SSD out by the carrier lever and set it aside. And the replacement SSD is going to come in the drive carrier. You're going to slide it in. Going to power up the node. Again, if IPMI was configured before, it still should be configured because the BMC was not replaced. It should join the realm with the same IP that it had before because the MAC hardware address is not changed. And again, if you need to configure networking in the odd case that you did not configure the node, this is in networking. In the case where you are just replacing a drive or the body, this is supposed to work without reinitializing the node. However, we have found that there's more pain than profit in doing that. What we're going to do is here we have without the faceplate. Again, if here's the node 2 drive tray, just like we saw before, it's marked with a D. So you're going to open that up, pop the drive out, and put it back in. You do not have to power down the node. Actually, you do have to power down the node, sorry. Because the director will be using it. This is unlike an OSD. Okay. So the node has new system files and a hardware serial number previously known to the realm. And you will have a warning that the node has a new drive or a new body. This can kind of confuse the realm, so the easiest way to do this is to reinitialize the node using the same commands we talked about earlier. At that point, the node will join the realm with the same IP, etc. Okay. We're going to run the steps to add the director to the rep set and balance the volume services if possible. throw away the drive. We do not want it back, and fill out a certificate of destruction for the drive. Replacing the ASD node chassis. If anything goes wrong with it except for the SSD, we're going to replace the whole chassis. We're going to run our preliminary steps, remove it from the rep set, move any primary volume services off. We're going to remove the network cables and level them. You do not have to remove the SSD. It is safe. It is safe and sound in the enclosure. The latch lever is here. You're going to push it to the right to release the node. This is the pull handle right here. Pull it straight out. Install the replacement D100 director node. We're going to hear a click when it's seated. Connect the network cables. Power on the node with the front power button. Yeah. When this boots, we're going to get a warning that the node has a new body. Actually, if you removed the node from the realm, so this is not necessary. You're going to connect a console and reinitialize the node. So we're going to log into the ASD director node with a VGA console session. IPMI doesn't work because it's got a new IPMI address. If you're using the 4x10 breakout cable, the port mode does not need to be changed because we ship with it in that mode. However, if you're going to be connecting two 40 gig cables to it, you need to change the NIC port mode. This is the command to do that, and it is discussed in more detail in this knowledge base article. We run this to set the mode and reboot. We're going to configure IPMI if desired, because it has a new BMC chip, so it doesn't have your IP or password or IPMI password. Yep. We're going to reinitialize this with the local commands described previously in this topic. Should join the realm and come online. The MAC address is different, so it will receive a different IP address than it had before. We will talk about changing the IP address before we add it to the rep set if you want. Then we're going to run the steps to add the director to the rep set and balance the volume services if applicable. So post-installation IP change. If the replacement director node or the node with the replaced SSD will be added to the rep set and does not have the same IP address as the previous director node, I'm going to change its IP address before adding it to the rep set. This is in the knowledge base article, but we're going to SSH into the DHCP server director. We're going to find that on the rep set page. We're going to run this service command mode interactive command, netconfig, IP ranges, IP change. It's going to prompt you for the node's existing IP, the desired IP. It does not matter whether another node has that IP or not. It will bump the other, well, actually it does, but you just freed the IP address, so it should be free. Script will restart the DHCP server process, reboot the replacement director so it obtained a new IP address, wait for about 5 minutes, confirm that the replacement director has come online, has the IP address that you want. If you're not adding the director to the rep set, you usually just let it get whatever IP, but if you want it to be in the rep set, remember that we hard-coded the rep set IPs into the mount options on our direct flow clients with the RM list equals. You probably have the rep set IPs in your DNS, so it's usually handy to change the rep set director's IP to one that it had before. You remember, we did this by rebooting the realm in our networking lab, but this method doesn't require rebooting the realm, just the node. All right, so if the director node that was replaced was a member of the rep set, we're going to add it to the rep set. This page, we talked about that in the other topic. If it was not a member of the rep set or another director was already added, this is not necessary, but we're going to go look at the rep set just to make sure that we have a redundant rep set. Rebalance the volume services. We previously moved the primary volume services off. That means the replacement director will not have any primary volume services. Other directors will have more than their share, so we want to rebalance them. When we talked about the volume services, we talked about not moving a volume services that was offline or in any kind of impaired condition. That still is true, but it is fine to move them. If everything is green on the volume services, you look on the volumes alerts, you don't see any alerts for volume services, then you can move these. For every move, the volumes are going to go down for about a second. Some people may want to wait till the end of the day. I would not wait more than 1 day for this. It's more important for them to be balanced than that volume access be interrupted for about 1 second. We want to move the primary volume services so no director has more than one full primary volume service. That doesn't include the little root volume service. The president may assign a different backup director to the services after it's been moved. We may need to balance the backups as well. Remember, we talked about not assigning backups when the president was working on it, but after we've let the president work on things, we're going to look and see what the president did and make sure that everything is balanced the way we want. And if the president has adjusted the backup services and we decide to move it after that, that's fine. No director should have more than 3 total primary and backup. Hopefully, you can't have more than 5 total in backup. 3 total primary and backup is fine, especially if one of them is for the little root volume service. And we will do that in our lab today. Again, here we have the same thing. If you have a secure drive and the faulty part is an ASU external SSD, that's fine. Just destroy the drive. If it is an ASD 100 node chassis, open the node chassis, remove and destroy the NVDIMM. ASD 100 does not have an M2 NVMe. If it is an ASD 200 node chassis, remove and destroy the internal NVMe and the NVDIMM. Please fill out a certificate of destruction for any parts you do not return. Return the failed node to Panasys, not a drive, but a node. And here are a number of knowledge base articles that apply to these situations. Questions about replacing a director before we move on? A Panasys enclosure power supply may be hot swapped if the other enclosure power supply or supplies have a green LED. In the case of an AS Charlie, you want the power supply on that side to have a green LED. Just remove the power cord, unlatch the power supply, and remove it with the handle. And if the other power supply does not have a green LED, we need to talk about it to make sure that the whole enclosure doesn't suddenly lose power. That would be rare. And replace, this can be totally hot swapped. No need to take any software actions. Install the replacement power supply. Here, a click. Verify, attach the power cord, verify that it is green, assuming that the nodes are powered up, and verify that the replacement power supply is recognized in the GUI. ASU 100, here's the power supply in the back. Here's the power cord in the latch layer and the foldable handle. Here is an ASD 100. Power supplies are a little bit different. The latch lever is the entail style. Entail style, you're going to push it to the side. There's a foldable handle that's not really seen there, but it's right there. You pull it out. There's the power cord sockets. The ASD 200 is very similar to the ASU 100, but it's on its side because this is a 2U enclosure versus a 4U enclosure. Latch layer, power cord socket, foldable handle, just pull it right out. Placing a network cable. There are times when we may suspect that a cable may be hot swapped. If we supplied the cable, we will send you a replacement if we don't think it is good. So if you replace a network cable for a redundant ASU 100, ASD 100, or ASD 100 40 gig, that should also include the ASF or the ASU 100E. You should not lose connectivity. There's a small chance that you do just because of the vagaries and mysteriousness of network stacks, but usually this does not disrupt node connectivity. If you're replacing an ASD 100 4x10 breakout cable, yes, it interrupts the node's connectivity. We're presuming that if you have a cable problem, it may not have connectivity anyway. But this should be, connectivity should resume in about 2 minutes. We have found that sometimes the node takes a couple of minutes to recognize the cable. Faulty cables are expendable, just throw them away. If they're really long, you can use them to tie up stuff in your shed or whatever. And they're not any good as cables. Replacing a Panasys enclosure. This requires an outage. The outage time is basically however long it takes you to physically swap the enclosure plus about 10 minutes. All depends on our network our lab administrators can probably do this, get it in and out in about 5 minutes. Ordinary people are going to take much longer. When I say ordinary people, people who do not swap out enclosures all the time or a lot. If you have dedicated people in your server room and you have a big server room, maybe they are just as superhuman as our administrators. Take the realm offline. We're going to talk about that on Friday. Power off and remove the nodes and power supplies that are in the enclosure. Using the GUI or PAN CLI. If this does not work, power down each Charlie ASU or Delta ASD from the front power button. This is one of the cases where you do want to unseat the ASD 100s. You have not moved the volume services, just unplug both power supplies. That will cause a power outage on all the ASD 100s in the enclosure, and that's what you want. Label and remove each network cable or power cord. You really want to be careful about this now because if you swap a cable from one interface to another on the same node, it's not the end of the world. If you put one cable into one node and the matching cable into a different node, it's not going to be a happy situation. So remove the cables and the cords, remove each node and power supply. You may want to also remove the disk from the node if the nodes are too heavy. That's up to you. Unrack the old enclosure. Our lab administrators can pull out a Charlie ASU node with all the disks installed. I could not do it. Rack the new enclosure. Please note that the Charlie ASU 100 enclosures have a tiny little spot on the outside of the enclosure where part of the cabling that goes from the node to the power supply is exposed. Don't want to snag that when you're putting it in. I have heard that putting a little piece of tape over it works very well. All right, so we're going to install each node, install the power supply. If you remove the external drives, put them back in the same slot they were in before these were removed. And it's important here, we're not going to reinitialize these nodes. Reconnect the network cable and the power cords as they were before. Once everything is back the way it was, power on each node with the front power button or IPMI. When at least one node reports its enclosure serial number to the REM president, president's going to create a record for the new enclosure in the Realm database. It doesn't think that this is the same enclosure. It's going to give it a new name, and it is a new enclosure. It doesn't. It's not going to understand that you're going to want it to be named the same thing. It's going to use the next default name for the enclosure type. Once all, and you're going to see both the old and the new enclosures in the GUI. Once all the nodes in the enclosure report their serial numbers to the president's going to realize that the old enclosure is no longer there, and it will remove that old enclosure's record, and that enclosure, the old enclosure, will disappear from the GUI and client. Once the nodes come online, you can bring the Realm online, and we're going to rename the enclosure to the name the old enclosure had. And we have a knowledge base article. Review. Is replacing ActiveStore hardware before Panessa's technical support has created an RMA for the part best practice?
No.
No, we want to get that squared away first. As a matter of fact, well, for a director, you can replace that. For a storage node, hopefully we've got the replacement process underway while it's still draining or reconstruction is running. In which three OSD states may the node be safely replaced? We've asked this before. We're going to ask it again to make sure this is well understood.
So drained,
I
think failed.
Failed, yes.
And then the one that's like not set up.
That's right, not activated. Very good.
Yeah.
You would recognize it if you saw it. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. Does the fact the GUI shows a node is offline mean the node may be safely replaced?
No.
Does not. That could mean a lot of different states. Can Ultras node external drives be individually replaced?
Yes.
Yes, they can. If the answer to the previous question is yes, what action must be taken on the node after a drive has been replaced?
Reinitialize the node.
Reinitialize, yes. Can a Panasas node be reinitialized from the GUI in most cases?
No.
No. Too tempting to do it when it's not appropriate. It's called an attractive nuisance. It's kind of like leaving an unguarded swimming pool when there are little children running around. Not that customers are little children, but you know what I mean. Hey, reinitialize me. No, let's think about that a little bit more. Can existing external drives be reinstalled in an Ultra node if the node chassis is replaced? We've removed
You-
the external drive. Yeah, I'm sorry, what
Yeah,
you
you
say?
don't have to. I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, you can. I mean, you don't want to be replacing drives that are perfectly good. So we just put them right back in. If the answer to the previous question is yes, what action must be taken on the node after the node chassis has been replaced?
You'd have to reinitialize.
That's right. Again, reinitialize. Does a Panasys node retain its IPMI configuration if an external drive is replaced?
Yes.
Yes. Does Panasys node retain its IPMI configuration if the node chassis is replaced?
No.
No, it does not. What system actions should be taken before replacing a Panasys director?
Move the volume service.
With the volume service. Another very important thing.
I mean,
What?
taking it offline, but
Well, no.
I don't know if that's
What
what you're getting at.
critical thing do some Panasys directors participate in?
If it's a member of the rep set, you need to remove
That's
it from the
Rep set. Rep set. Let's see if it's a member of the rep set, and if so, let's gracefully remove it. You can also disable the IP aliases. Most people don't have those, and the implications of not doing that are not as great, but you should do that as well if you're using IP aliases. What system actions should be taken after replacing a Panasys director?
Put the volume services back on it. Put it back in the rep set.
Indeed. Make sure we got a redundant rep set, probably by adding this director back to it, but at least verifying that and rebalancing the volume services. You don't have to move the very same volume service that you moved off, but you do want to typically move something. What action must be taken on a replacement Bravo ASD 100 director node if two 40 gig cables will be attached?
Set the networking type to be 2x40.
That's right, the port mode, yes, shelf SYNNET mode. That doesn't apply to a whole lot of people, but I mean, you will flat have no connectivity if you don't do this, if you're using these cables. Must a Panasys node be powered down to replace an enclosure power supply?
No.
No. Must a Panasys node be powered down to replace a node network cable?
No.
Must a Panasys node be powered down to replace its enclosure?
Yes.
Yes. Replacing an enclosure is pretty rare, but it can happen sometimes. And sometimes we replace an enclosure simply because we're having mysterious failures in the same slot or in the same enclosure, and we have replaced everything else and said, all right, now we're going to replace the enclosure. And a lot of times it works for some unknown reason. There are times when there is a bad power supply or something that shorts out the enclosure where we also have to do that. That's very rare. Questions on this? All right. Okay, we're going to talk about capacity balancing, and then we're going to do a lab that kind of combines all of the hardware replacement and capacity balancing. Oops.